I'm so excited to have this second hour. I just have to say so. So one of the things that we've gotten really good at is we have Zoom ISO, and it's really great that we can grab onto, and a lot of apps now have it, and we can grab onto those feeds and we can put out the isolated tracks to it. But at some point, we have to figure out, well, how do we show the gallery? Like, how do we show everybody? And this is a problem that we have. We have this challenge in our show. We have a challenge, but really where this becomes a real pain point is in big events. I want to show the gallery and I don't want it to just look like everybody else's Zoom. I want it to look like my show. I want it to look like with my backgrounds, my edges, my curved corners, whatever I want it to look like. And that has been a huge challenge. And if you go kind of up higher, you can even do things like Unreal Engine. But you need to have something that's just easy for everybody to use. You can turn it on, you can have it join, and I've been playing with Tiles, and I'm just over the moon with the app. And not only am I excited about Tiles as what it does right now, but it's just the most fluid feeling app on a Mac that I've ever. I mean, it's the most Mac app that I've ever used. I think because everything is so responsive, and we'll talk about that a little bit. We're really excited to have Andy Carluccio, who is the Zoom's head of client innovation, and Jonathan Kokotajlo, who is the innovation technical program manager and really one of the driving forces behind the app here on the show. Andy and Jonathan, so good to have you back.
Yeah, great to see you, Alex, and everyone on the panel. Really happy to be back to talk about Tiles.
Tell us, how did this get started? Like, how did you decide to build Tiles?
Yeah, this goes all the way back even to the liminal days prior to us joining the Zoom team. And I think you hit the nail on the head with the problem that we wanted to solve, right? How to show a group of people on screen remotely without inheriting the quote unquote Zoom aesthetic, right? You want it to be customizable. You want it to fit the brand of your event. You don't want it to stand out in an odd contrast to the way that your event is designed to look and feel. So there's been many iterations of how to do this over the years. It started with people just putting the gallery view up on a screen somewhere, right? It had those aesthetic challenges, right? The gallery view is a user interface, so it is not necessarily the most aesthetically pleasing thing to show to your audience. From there, we saw people getting creative and using things like cropping shaders to split up the gallery view into all the individual tiles, and they'd bring it into something like Resaloom or Isadora, and they would kind of relay it out that way. That still required a bunch of computers, right, to ingest all those galleries, right?
And not only that, if you do a cropping, if you're not careful, the Zoom, the interface is constantly changing, right, who's there, and your cropping breaks constantly.
So we saw some of that as well, for sure. And then things took a bit of a turn when we introduced Zoom ISO, and you could now get the individual video feed, so you wouldn't have to worry about those cropping challenges. But then you're managing all the individual stems of all those audience members. And that can be challenging from an infrastructure perspective to deal with. So at our own Zoomtopia in 2022, that's what we did. We had Zoom ISO extracting all the individual video feeds of our audience.
How many laptops did you have back there?
For the big event, we had, I think, like 20 different MacBook Airs to try to pull all that out. And that's, primaries and backups, but even still, it was quite a challenge for that level of scale. So it was clear that something more ergonomic was needed in order to fit into this space. And that's where Tiles really comes from. It comes from us doing our own events and trying to do events for clients and realizing that this was a difficult workflow that an app really needed to solve. And that's what we've done with Tiles. We've made it easier to create a customized branded gallery view with your own moderation and control logic that you can just send it out to a screen and that audience will now feel like part of your event.
That's great. Why is it only on the Mac?
So on the PC side, where we actually started, we have the Unreal Engine integration. And so we're trying to play to the strengths of each platform. With the PC, you can bring in those high-end GPUs, those NVIDIA cards, and you can really do some very impressive, very immersive 3D work with those and work at resolutions that are very high-end, 8K, 60, all that kind of stuff. That's going to be really in the domain of the PC. And so we invested a lot of time and energy in making sure that our Unreal Engine integration, which again, we came back and talked about in the spring.
And we used it at NAB. So at NAB, we used the Unreal Engine version of that.
We used it for NAB. We used it for Zoomtopia. We definitely see the role of the PC in this space. But when it comes to this idea of something that's a little bit more compact or can fit within a performance profile that a Mac can offer, and then can leverage all the advantages that a Mac has as well, that's where we felt that rather than trying to duplicate the same application across two different platforms, we would play to the strengths of each platform and have a unique integration on each side. So there are some advantages that Tiles has, specifically its footprint, right? So it can run on, the cheapest Mac Mini, the cheapest Mac that you can buy, right?
Now, why is that possible? Like it seems crazy that you can go out and buy a $500 Mac Mini and then have this very large Tiles display of all these videos. Why is that? Why is the Mac different, and why is it possible?
Because we play to the strengths of the platform, right? So when you try to build a cross-platform application, oftentimes you're working in a cross-platform compatibility layer, and you leave a lot of performance on the table because you kind of had the lowest common denominator in some cases. Other times you have overhead from the intermediary layer that actually can harm performance as well. But if you develop an app specifically for the target platform, just like we did with Unreal Engine, where we had some NVIDIA-specific, DirectX-specific optimizations to get the performance high on that side, we've done the same thing with Apple Silicon. And with Apple Silicon, there are a lot of different hooks and things that we can get into to optimize the entire video pipeline. And we're using things like Swift UI, but we're also using other metal-based accelerators and things like that in order to get to this really high performance profile on affordable hardware. So
and what is the advantage of Swift is still, it's not new anymore. It's been out for I think almost a decade, but it's still people are slow to become Swift adopters, all lock, stock, and barrel. What are the advantages of working just purely in Swift as opposed to, just using it in pieces?
Well, I think that there's a certain access to all of Apple's frameworks that while you can get access to some of these things with Objective-C and even C++, the Swift programming language really ties it all together a lot more easily. And it creates this very interesting dynamic where you can, like I said, or as you mentioned at the top of the hour, this responsive feeling, right? Where I'm working within these menus. These are menus that users have seen maybe in other applications on their Mac. There's a certain consistency to the entire operating system experience that comes from using these frameworks. And then it also is the easiest way to get access to all the low-level capabilities without having to, necessarily unwind how all of this stuff works.
Well,
right?
And isn't one of the advantages if you're building it on top of Apple's frameworks, when they keep on changing the frameworks, you're just going to float along with those rather than drowned in the changes.
That's right. So you're on the happy path, is kind of what we would say, right? And that's where Apple is paying particular attention to these frameworks and how they're utilized. And so we are taking advantage, right? There's even sometimes where you'll see, things that will come out into the operating system or into the SDKs and frameworks that then will make sense years later when the hardware that, is going to leverage these capabilities comes along, right? I think we saw that very clearly on the journey with Metal and some of the vector imaging processes. Apple will signal years ahead of time, hey, you want to take a look at these frameworks because we're going to have an investment into that later. So by using these technologies, we're able to offer, like I said, a really impressive price to performance on the machines, but also a very responsive interface and something that feels very native to the platform that we're offering it on.
Now, are you able to show us a little bit of how Tiles works?
Yes, I can. So I'm going to jump into a screen share here, and I will show you Tiles. So here we are. I have it dialed into a testing meeting right now. And I'm in the editor tab at the moment. So the editor tab allows us to design a customized gallery view. And there's a couple different things that we can do. And I demoed this at NAB, so I'll keep it brief here today. But I can set, a customized number of participants. So maybe I want to do 6, and I want to add some spacing in between them. And you can see as I'm adjusting these sliders, right, the background, the pre-visualization is adjusting along with me. So I can set up maybe a blue background, and then I can choose whether I want these, aligned to the top or to the bottom, but I'll leave it.
And that, by the way, is huge for me. When I was playing with this, when we used Tiles for the WWDC coverage, and being able to just kind of, I'm going to put questions at the bottom, or I'm going to do something else. I just want to move everything to the top. I don't want it to be centered or to the bottom, or being able to create the padding around the outside edge was very valuable. Yeah,
good point on the padding. Right now I have the video tiles up against the left and right edge, so I can just turn on, 30 points of padding, and now I have a little bit of a buffer there. I can change the aspect ratio of the tiles, so 5x4 will fill up this space a little bit more. I can pull in the corner radius if I want to do a kind of a rounded rectangle look. I can have a border, and I can even choose whether I want that border to be centered or inside. I can even make that border semi-transparent if I wanted to. So if I make it white, but then I set the opacity to 50%, now it will kind of play with that. And then I can also turn on a shadow, so I can have a drop shadow that I can diffuse a little bit and maybe pull that off the bottom right edge there.
And again, I think that what's interesting is that it's so performant. Like you're sitting there doing it, and there's something, I think that people underestimate how powerful that is. Like, you can do it another way. You can type numbers in. But when you're able to move something and see it all changing and get a sense of it, it greatly accelerates your ability to iterate. And we have to always remember that you never finish a project; you just run out of time.
Right.
And so that every second, if you're cutting a second into a tenth of a second, it's 10 times faster, and you're making better decisions.
Right. And in just a few seconds here, we created a customized gallery view that would take hours, if not days in other workflows, right? Especially at scale. If you had to do a bunch of these, right,
Yeah.
you can imagine that could take an entire day of just programming in a media server. And that's before we even get to I'm going to go ahead and enable the outputs now. So now we have the live Zoom video feeds flowing into the app. So you can see now that we've got that kind of that all the design capabilities that we had in the editor tab carried over here too.
And this is just from just joining a Zoom room, right? I mean, this is like we're joining a Zoom meeting. So when you're talking about flowing these in, you're not sitting there manually saying, I'm going to have this person in this box, I'm going to have this person in this box. That's what I've been jumping into our meetings occasionally with it so I can play with it. And I just jump in, and to everybody else, I am it might ask for record capabilities, whatever, but I don't know if it does it. Anyway, I guess I'm so thick-skinned to that now that I don't think about it. But I just jump into the meeting, and now I can throw everybody into these screens.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. It joins just like a participant, and similar to Zoom ISO, you can either request recording or live streaming permission. It will extract all the video feeds, and it will manage that for you. So instead of identifying all the outputs and then routing them into boxes, it does that all automatically. We also have this concept of a queue here at the bottom. So the queue is the number of spillover. So it's how many people are are eligible to be on screen, but there aren't enough spots on screen. So we can rotate these on a set timer, and we have a whole variety of different animations that we can use. So if I look at my animations tab here, you can see that we've got all sorts of interpolation systems. We're using a flip animation right now with ease in and out, but I could set that to spring. And spring will kind of create this interesting effect where it will overshoot and then rewind a little bit, so to create more of an interactive feeling. Look for the tile so you can see there, just on the top right, kind of did that spring animation. So we have a whole lot of different controls. But the purpose of this queue down here is to be able to focus your attention on who's coming up next versus on the entire audience. And this is something that we found from running our own events is that, if you have 1,000 people in the meeting, it's going to be very hard to keep an eye on everybody's status. So what you really want to do is have a clear insight into who's on screen and who's coming up next. And that's what this queue offers you. So if I don't like a certain video feed, I can block it, and then it will send it into the blocked category. I've got these filters on the left-hand side where I can see everybody. So here's the blocked video feed. If I want to unblock here and bring it back into rotation, I can see who's got video on or who has video off. So I have kind of a full dashboard to be able to manage the moderation of who's going on screen as well. In addition to, of course, the output capabilities.
And what's the maximum number of tiles that you can see at one time?
Yeah, so that's going to be a function of your downlink bandwidth. So if I go back to the editor tab, you can see that under the tile design, I have this participant resolution box. And this is where I can pick the individual resolution of each Zoom participant going into those boxes. What's interesting with tiles is that if, in this case, for example, my canvas is 1920 by 1080, but each individual tile is only occupying a fraction of that 1080p canvas. So pulling them all at 1080p doesn't necessarily give me a visual advantage because it's going to be rendered onto a 1080p canvas and you won't appreciate the extra resolution. So your downlink should be 30 megabit per second for most accounts. Some accounts have access to 100 megabit per second downlink. That depends on what we call high bandwidth mode. And the individual video resolutions will control how much that kind of multiplies up. So in the user guide, I have this chart that shows at this resolution, this is how much bandwidth you're consuming, and try to keep it within the 30 or the 100 if you know you can do the 100. So that's all kind of laid out in the docs. But generally speaking, it's going to be you multiply the bit rate at the resolution that you picked, multiply by the number of people, and if that stays within your envelope, that's how many you can do. I would say typically we recommend probably somewhere in the 30s. At 360p, it's around a megabit per feed. So that's kind of where that works out to.
And are you limited to 1920 by 1080?
No, you can literally type in whatever you want here. You can put in any resolution that you want, and there's no training wheels on that. Now, to be clear, this is currently in beta. It's an open beta right now, so there may be certain things subject to change, but we don't artificially limit the canvas resolution at this time.
Can you support more than one monitor?
Yes, you can. So if I turn off my engine, I can actually create additional displays. And so now I have 4 different galleries, and each of them can have a unique design, and participants will waterfall from display 1 to display 4 in this setup. And these
can
all
your
be routed
sorting
to
be
different
different
outputs.
for each monitor?
Not yet. So there's one algorithm, which is the queue, that kind of governs everything right now. Mm-hmm. And in the future, we might look at how to customize and create more of a scene-based workflow. But for now, these are all kind of discrete outputs. You can imagine like physical displays that are going to be in my room. How do I get them, routed out without duplication and things like that?
Can you look for things like people's hands up? Is that
we don't currently support that data. We do have, let me turn this back on. So we have a couple of things with the overlays here. So I can see the incoming resolution of the participants. I can see their video status, their co-host status. And I have the ability to favorite or block them to keep them in a certain position. Now, there are other things that we definitely want to explore with this, such as how to quantify interaction and use that to drive participation on these displays. Those are things that we'll get to as we continue through the
And
beta.
if someone raised their hand, you could favorite them, and then they would pop up into that.
You could definitely do that, right? But we want to look at other things too, like active speaker as an indicator, hand raise, like you said, as an indicator. There's a bunch of different things that we want to take a look at here.
And you have color back here, but can you put an image back there?
You can. So you have the ability to select image as a type of background, and then you can upload a file, and you can set that as the background for the display.
That's great. We've got questions rolling in, so we're going to jump into a couple of these questions here. Let's go to the first question, Bill.
First one, Grant Whitehead in Adelaide, Australia says, loving tiles, thank you. Is having attendee name overlaid on the output display on the wish list if it makes it currently not usable for our in-studio on-set screens?
Go ahead, Jonathan.
Yes, so it definitely is on the roadmap, and we will support allowing a name tag to be centered on the participant tile instead of just justified to the left. But would love to hear other requests as to how to style those titles. Of course, we have full control over how we place those onto these video feeds. So yes, we will have that on the roadmap. No commitment yet as for date.
That's exciting. And it's one of the reasons that I wanted to make sure. There was a great overview of this in Zoom Test Kitchen as well, where there was a walkthrough. And so I would recommend, I don't know, are those recorded or are they just, they are. So I would take a look at that. But one of the things that's really important to remember is that this is in beta right now. This is when the clay is soft. So it's a great time to download tiles and to play with it and give feedback and say, well, I really wish I had this. Don't complain about it in a year if it didn't show up because you didn't ask for it. So definitely download the app and provide feedback. Next question.
David Brady in New York is up next. Is there an SDI workflow for tiles?
Go ahead, Andy.
So we're planning to introduce the different output capabilities that Zoom ISO has into tiles. In fact, they actually share an output engine right now. So the kind of the same way that Zoom ISO can send to a variety of export protocols, we have the same plans for tiles. Today, if you were doing it, you would take an HDMI to SDI converter and you would grab a system display and bring it into the box, and then you would send it out that way if you had to do that with today's beta. But in the future, like I said, we're going to introduce additional export protocols like NDI and SDI.
Next question.
Next one comes from Rian Smith in Trinidad, West Indies, asking for the audience, what's the minimum subscription needed to get the Zoom Tiles option?
Go ahead, Andy.
There's no subscription required for the audience. They just join the meeting that's set up by the owner account, the organizer. Now, the organizer also doesn't have to have any particular account to use this. Is the only thing that we check license-wise is the user using tiles. So the person who actually is going to be joining the meeting and pulling out the individual feeds. So when you download tiles, it has a free trial. We can do all the editor stuff. You can design anything that you want. The only restriction is that it can't join meetings. When you sign into it, you have to be what's called a hub host. A hub host basically means that someone with a Zoom Events license created a hub and they added you to it. The idea of a hub in Zoom Events is basically that the license holder is probably going to be like an admin account that the IT back office is going to have. So we don't require you to sign in with the actual events license holder account. We just ask that, and this is how all of Zoom Events works, that you create a hub, then maybe you have somebody from sales and somebody from marketing, and then maybe your events people are on that as well. And so it doesn't matter if you have the license or not. You just need to be part of a hub on Zoom Events. And then when you sign in, it will allow you to join meetings, webinars, and events, whether that's inside of the Zoom Event platform, outside the Zoom Event platform, or even on a completely different account. There's no restriction on what you can join. Yeah.
So the hub can include people that are not inside of the owner's account?
No. So the hub is only for people who are inside of the same account. But once you're signed in, you can join a meeting hosted by any account.
Oh, right.
It doesn't necessarily have to be part of Zoom Events or that account.
That makes sense. Next question.
Scott Mueller in Germantown, New York, up next. Will we still need to have talent in one meeting and participants in another with Zoom tiles? How does the Zoom audience see the tiles output?
Andy?
Yeah, so there's a couple different things that come to mind here. To answer the second part of that question, you can provide back a kind of a confidence monitor by just like you've done before, just pass a a USB or a virtual camera back into meeting, and then you can set that as the camera, so to speak, of tiles, and that will allow the audience to see how the designs have been created. But honestly, that's very much just a confidence monitor. It's not designed to be your primary viewing experience. Whenever you pull content out of Zoom, you're going to want to send that into a different Zoom meeting or a different Zoom event in order to make sure that the audio and video can be delivered in sync. But one of the advantages here is that you could, if this is going primarily virtual, you're doing something that's hybrid maybe, you can have, a talent meeting with Zoom ISO and pull out all the individual feeds there. And then you can have an audience meeting and you can pull out their galleries, and then you can arrange everything in the room or for the live stream and provide a confidence monitor back to the group. Theoretically, you could also have the presenters and the audience in the same meeting, and you could pull out some with tiles and some with Zoom ISO. But that would be, I think there's other reasons that you may not want to do that are not strictly technical, but maybe just about your kind of run a show.
Next question.
Douglas Carmichael up next. Is the Zoom events requirement for the use of tiles a technical limitation or a marketing-driven requirement?
This is how we're licensing the app. So, with our other applications in the past, we've sold device-based licenses where you'd pay a subscription and you'd get an activation key, and you would insert that key into the app, and then that would be how the app would activate. Now we're moving to a licensing system that is based on your Zoom account, which makes sense because if you think about especially enterprise customers, right? They don't want to have to manage those individual license keys and have to refresh them and rotate them and all of that stuff. If they can just dynamically allocate, right, the participation to members of their organization, that's been the feedback that we've received on device-based licensing. So by making it part of the Zoom Events platform, it makes it really easy for us to be able to help all those enterprise customers with their provisioning requirements, while also doing something that feels a little more native to Zoom's licensing. Liminal device-based licenses have always been kind of this thing that's, it's not quite native to the procurement process that the rest of Zoom uses. Zoom doesn't have other products necessarily that have, activation key strings that you insert into apps in that traditional way. So this is moving to make it more along the lines of how the rest of Zoom handles licensing.
Yeah, and I think that there's always when you come up with new features, you're like, well, it should be free, but it costs money to make these things. To make good, this is why we have good things, is because there has to be some revenue stream that's connected to how these all work. There's server costs of delivering the data, there is the development cost, there's the organizational costs. And so we as users, especially as production users, want it to cost money because we want there to be revenue and then resources to keep on doing these things, because there's nobody else doing, when I open up Teams, I still get a white window. I don't even know what that is. Like, it just opens up on my computer for no apparent reason. That's the level of production quality that we get out of Teams. I don't mean to be rough, but I'm just saying that we have a team here that is focused on what we do, but that only stays focused if it's generating revenue. Yeah.
There's also some simplicity to the licensing model that we have, where now, it used to be, right, that you'd have, maybe I have this Zoom license, and then I have maybe this events license, and then I have these liminal licenses, and they're all kind of disparate. And now what we've done is we brought it all together and we said, made it really simple for you. If you get the Zoom Events license, or you get on the hub with Zoom Events, you have all the liminal tools, you have the rest of the Zoom Events platform and the Zoom features that come with that. So it just makes it a lot simpler to say, rather than having to go buy 15 different things to produce an event, you'll get a Zoom Events license, and now you have all the tools, regardless of what type of person you are, right? If you're just a marketing person, maybe, who wants to use Production Studio and have it kind of handhold you, all the way up to if you're a broadcaster and you're going to bring people into the nightly news, you're going to pull them out with Zoom ISO, right? So now it's one license that can cover all those types of use cases.
Next question.
Jeff Veely from Henderson, Texas up next. When do you estimate Tiles will be production ready?
Yeah, so that'll be when it comes out of beta. Now, when it will come out of beta is a function of how the beta testing goes, right? So I always love the question of like, how long will it be in beta? I'm like, I don't know. It depends on when it's ready, right? So it'll be ready when it's ready. We have our own internal events teams that use Tiles on projects that help inform us about how it's doing. So we have, external testing now with the open community, and we're always looking for feedback on that. So we get those tickets that come in and people provide feedback. We have forums like this where there's feature requests and things of that nature. And then we have, like I said, our own internal events team that's giving us feedback that we can go in with our engineers and pick apart, what's going on and get that additional data. So all these things help inform us about how we do a release. And when we feel confident about the events that we're running and we feel that we have enough features, right, to have a cohesive workflow, then at that point, we would say that this would be generally available. It's just something that we don't rush. We want to put the beta tag on it because it's a new product, it's a new service, whole new technical capabilities, and then a lot of things that we want to add, right? We want to get those NDI outputs and things like that in there before we would say that this is GA, just so that we have a clear expectation about what the overall workflow is that we're looking for.
Next question.
Craig Kadoki in Toronto. Can you have multiple instances of tiles running on separate Macs that are cross-linked so that multiple unique galleries can be seen in an event without having duplicate gallery members?
Go ahead, Andy.
It's on the list. This is not something that we've got to in the first beta, but it's something that we're definitely thinking about, how to make sure that there's coordination across multiple kind of rendering nodes, specifically to address that question about duplication. Today, what you would do is you would just block on the subsequent systems the ones that you have on the primary ones.
Right, and you could have different groups, like show all these people on this one, show another set of people. Like you could block them individually, but you could also just say only show this section, inside of that.
Not in today's beta, but that's kind of the direction that we want to go.
Got it. Next question.
Paul Wallace out of Austin, Texas. What makes up a live event auditorium?
Good, Jonathan.
So I think when we talk about live event auditorium in the context of tiles, what we really want to emphasize is that tiles is a great solution for any hybrid event where you have a virtual audience that you want to display in the room in order to create a better feeling of sort of equality or of togetherness, right? Because you can put some big projectors or LED screens behind the panelist on stage, and you can put this audience output from tiles directly onto that display. And now you have a branded, customized background that shows participants, and that has a profound effect on the panelists and the presenters on stage to be able to see not just the people sitting in the seats, but also the people online, right? But you can use it in other creative ways as well. For previous Zoomtopias, we have turned those displays in portrait orientation, just as a more interesting way to display these video feeds. We've even used multiple displays side by side. And then, of course, you can also use this on a more technical level to give a confidence return monitor to that speaker on stage so that they can see a gallery that is the right size that you want, the right density that you want, and just present it to that panelist in a stronger way. Again, trying to give them that interaction that they wouldn't normally have with a virtual audience that they can't see.
Yeah, and it's important like that when you talk to the vertical, it just means it's just going to flow into vertical. You just say, I just want this to be, instead of being 1080 high, it's 1920 high or whatever that monitor is, and it automatically just changes. And so you can see it here. I think Andy's showing that process right now. Maybe we can cut to it. So but yeah, so there you can see, so you could have multiple monitors here. And again, when you think about those multiple outputs, you could also have let's say four monitors out of your Mac Studio or whatever, and more, I guess, out of your Mac Pro. Like a Mac Pro could theoretically support, I don't know how many, I've never tried, I don't have a Mac Pro, so I don't know how many monitors it'll support, but a bunch. And all of those could be blended in something like resaloom or other things like that. So you have this kind of continuous experience all the way around something. So you could theoretically put up a lot of them, or as we said before, somewhere in the future, multiple machines doing that so that it can make that actually happen. It's really interesting. Next question.
Roz Humphreys in Quebec, BC, Canada. Can the background be dynamic or video?
Go ahead, Andy.
So the idea is that today, because we only support a display output, you'd have to key it. But in the future, when we support protocols that support an alpha channel, you'd be able to bring in dynamic content behind the tiles. So this is something that we did at Zoomtopia. We had vMix doing a play out of a video loop, and then we had our tiles with transparency overlaid on top of them via NDI. So the alpha channel of NDI just came into vMix, and it was an overlay layer on top of a video background. Today, Tiles supports a color background, and it supports a image background. It doesn't support videos. There's a lot of complexity involved in playing out video loops perfectly and or doing it with the right performance considerations, especially because the tile or the canvas size can differ from the video size. There's a couple reasons for this, but yes, you'll be able to support that kind of workflow once we have the production protocols in place that support alpha channel.
Next question.
Next one comes to us from Roz Humphreys again. Oh, I'm sorry, Paul Wallace. What? Oh, no, that's the live auditorium. It didn't cycle. Roz Humphreys.
No, I think you're at Scott Mueller here.
Oh, okay. So down. There we go. Scott Mueller, Germantown, New York. Can tiles detect when participants have their camera blacked out versus off and reject them from the gallery?
Go ahead, Jonathan.
Yes, it can. And you can specify whether you want to exclude the non-video participants or include them, and it'll just show their name tag. And I will also mention on this as well, in the animations tab, you have the capability to specify what is the behavior when a tile is removed from the gallery. Do you want it to instantly cut and be removed, or do you want it to fade away into the background? We want to provide those options to give you flexibility to customize the look. And then also the default behavior is that if you remove a participant because they turned off their camera, it will cycle in the next participant from the queue if available. So if you have a gallery of 16 participants, it will always stay 16 even as participants turn off their video because new participants will be cycled in.
Yeah, just to clarify, it doesn't detect if they're sending black in as their video. So if they hit like fade to black on an ATEM and they send in black, it's not going to detect that, which I think might be Scott's question, but if they turn off their video in Zoom, it will detect that, and then everything Jonathan said will apply. In the future, we want to do additional analytics on the live video feeds, and that might help us with curating the audience. And then at that point, we could look at things, more complex and actually look at the substance of the video feed. But right now, we're looking at just the data that surrounds the video feed.
Seems like AI analyzation could make a difference here.
Oh, yeah.
Like I want to show everybody who's smiling. Like that kind of thing. Yeah, so the next question.
Teeth detection. I like it.
Yeah, exactly.
Guy Cochran in Seattle, USA. Is there a way to, with just 2 displays, to have presets for 2 up, 3 up, 4 up, 5 up, and so forth that we can switch to on the fly?
Go ahead, Andy.
Yeah, so I think it's important to say that right now, Tiles is not a video switcher. So it's designed for displaying your audience. It doesn't have this idea of different scenes or looks for a display. It's designed specifically to show your audience. It's not designed to show a panel. So you're still going to use Zoom ISO, or you're going to use one of the many software switchers that have Zoom integrations to design those specific looks with different people in different boxes that you've decided where everyone's going to go and how it's going to look. That workflow is still very legitimate, and Tiles is not attempting right now to encroach on that workflow. It's very specifically targeted at this idea of creating a customized gallery. You can certainly create multiple displays with different numbers of people in them, and you can also adjust the properties of those galleries on the fly if you wanted to. But just to be clear, the swimming lane for Tiles is definitely not getting into the world of building a panel. It's designed for building a general gallery view where everybody's kind of on equal footing. In the future, that's not to say that's not going to be subject to change, but today that's definitely not the focus of the application.
And again, one of the things that we took our first step in this coverage, the second ear coverage that we did for WWDC, we used Tiles for that, and I thought it was a big success for us. I think it looked really good. It was very easy to set up. I think that the next step for us is that becomes an element. So right now you see us oftentimes cut to a gallery view. In this case, it would cut to that gallery view, and it would just be Tiles. And that's just the input. And I do think that we can play with, whether it's 4 up or what, those can be different screen outputs that we can decide, what we're doing there. So, next question.
Douglas Carmichael up again. In this case, would there be a Zoom Events license affordable enough for small organizations like startup production companies and or freelancers or churches and schools?
Andy?
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of different pricing models for Zoom Events, and there's kind of 2 different tracks that you can go down. There's Zoom Events Unlimited, and then there's pay per attendee. So I would recommend looking at pay per attendee if you're just going to experiment and play around, because you can try some of those features. If you don't have a giant audience, right, you can try some of those features inside of a Zoom Events PPA, is what we call PPA license, and they're pretty affordable. I think PPA 50 is like $100 a year. So that's a great way to get started with it. And also keep in mind that attendees are only counted against when they're ticketed through the Zoom Events platform. So, for example, if you wanted to try out the app, but you weren't planning to actually do all your work inside of Zoom Events, that would be a totally suitable way for the long term even to use the app. So those are things that you can look at based on the current licensing structure. Not to say things won't change over time, but I think that where it sits today, I think there's a lot of options for that.
Next question.
Stefan Fischer in Würzburg, Germany. The Zoom website says there are Zoom sessions and Zoom events under the events platform. Is Zoom sessions sufficient to use tiles?
Andy?
Absolutely. Yep. Any license under the Zoom. So actually, Tiles doesn't even care what license you have. Like I said before, Tiles just cares that you're on the hub of a Zoom event license. So the person who creates the hub, they could be a PPA license holder, they could be a ZE Unlimited license holder, they could be a Sessions license holder. That doesn't matter, right? So just so long as that you sign into Tiles with an account that's on a Zoom Events hub, you're good to go. That hub can be created by any type of license, and Tiles won't check about that.
What I was going to ask there is, I lost it. Next question.
David Brady will help. And in New York City, when streaming direct from Zoom to Custom Live, is the tiled look streamed, or does the tiled output need to be fed into an external encoder?
Jonathan?
So no, it is not streamed. And again, just to repeat, to be clear, the Tiles output currently can output through a display output attached to that Mac. In the future, it will support the Zoom ISO output types, NDI, SRT, Siphon, and so on.
Oh, this is what I was going to ask about the last question, Andy, is from a licensing perspective, is it just that one person can use it at a time in the hub, or can as many people connected to the hub use it at the same time? Could 5 different events be using Tiles in the same hub?
They could be. They could be using it simultaneously. All we ask is that you don't share your login credentials with different humans. And that's for reasons that are beyond just Tiles itself, right? You wouldn't want to share a login, but you can sign into Tiles with the same account on multiple computers and join them all to different events simultaneously if you wanted to. All we ask is that if there's different true users of the application, that they each be a different user on the hub.
Right.
And that's just for taking care of your credentials and things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Next question.
Kyle Hammond in Chicago says, does share screen or playback work the same in Tiles?
Go ahead, Andy.
There's no integration of screen share into Tiles right now. It's just the audience gallery. So people can still screen share and it won't negatively impact, the output, which is great because, if you've done that, putting your Zoom user interface on screen to show the gallery view and then somebody screen shares, now you're showing the screen share on all your displays. You're not showing the gallery. So that is a pain. And that's one of the things that Tiles addresses by dealing with the raw video feeds of the participants and then creating its own layout logic, is that there's no interference from those other type of systems in the way that the gallery is displayed.
And the way you would do that typically would be something, you wouldn't put it in the gallery, but that's a Zoom ISO, so this would be kind of like you got Zoom ISO delivering the ISO of each person, as well as that's what we do here. So when you see the screen capture that Andy was showing there, that is coming in via Zoom ISO into our edit system being delivered, and our editor can cut to that like now anytime they like.
Right.
So it's its own feed, which is really powerful for us. But that's usually the way you'd want to see a screen capture anyway. You don't really want to see it. You don't really want to see it as part of the Tiles. And again, I think that when you think about that as Tiles as like a production element, not a show, I think it makes sense. Next question.
Next one comes to us from David Brady in New York City. Will the queue feature, with the queue feature, is it configured for only one tile crosspoint, or can multiple be targeted?
Andy?
So the queue operates across all the different displays that you have. So it's a waterfall system. So I'll jump to my screen share here for a second, and I'm going to go to the editor tab. I'm going to create a second display, and we'll leave us on the default purple. And I'm going to turn the engine on now, and you'll notice that there's nobody in the queue. So my first display, if you recall, it has 4 outputs, right? And I have, I think, 8 people in this meeting. So I think I only have 6 video users in this call right now. So I've got these 4 from my first group, and then the 2 spares waterfalled into the second display. So it's currently at 2 out of 16, and there's nobody left in the queue. So again, with 6 qualifying video users, I got this kind of setup here where it waterfalls from one to the other. The queue will kind of will popcorn across the different displays to create a rotation. So when you see this red number up here in the corner, this is the next video feed that would be flipped, basically, if there was somebody to backfill them from the queue. So the logic is you fill display 1, then display 2, and so on and so forth across all your galleries. Then you fill your queue, and then the rest of them will backfill the queue. The queue will backfill the displays or rotate across them, if that makes sense.
Now, if you had multiple computers and multiple logins inside the same hub, you could theoretically set different sorting methods in those different computers for different sources. Does that make sense?
Yeah, not today, but I think that that's where we want to get to, is the ability to, again, to have multiple computers working together to generate
but I'm saying, but you could have one that was like all, right? And then you could have one that's just your favorites on two different computers.
Oh, yeah, you could do that too. Yeah.
So for instance, you could have a whole gallery. I want to cut to the panelists, or I want to cut to the handful of people that are talking. If I had two computers with two different logins, but in the same hub, I could have, those could just be filed into a switcher. Right. Yeah. And I can just switch between the two of them to make that actually work.
Yeah, you can do a ton with blocking and favoriting. And that's kind of in lieu of having the multiple tiles instances communicating with each other over the network and sorting out who should go where. That's the manual way to do it, is just favorite and block.
Yeah, absolutely. How does it deal with audio? Is it really just designed as a video source?
Yeah, so the audio is handled just the same way that you would handle it with the Zoom Workplace client, where you have control of your speaker and your microphone. So if you wanted to send this audio out to something, you could do that by selecting a speaker like, Dante Virtual Sound Card or something like that, or Loopback or Black Hole.
Next question.
Next one comes from Rian Smith again in Trinidad, the West Indies. Can tiles be controlled by Companion or OSC? If not, please consider it so to allow Streamdeck to do commands easily.
Go ahead, Andy.
Yeah, so that's, having created Zoom Cuts and Zoom OSC, and probably the most user-controllable, API-based unified communications platform. That is definitely something that we want to do. The reason it's not there right now is because we're still developing the features. So you don't want to create an API for something that hasn't solidified in terms of what it can and can't do, because then all the developers who build integrations off of that API would be kind of jerked around a little bit, because they wouldn't be able to necessarily rely on the spec. So what we're going to do is we're going to get it to the general availability point, and that will make us confident that the corpus of features that we've introduced at that time are the ones that we're going to be with for the long term. And then we'll look at how do we make that more controllable, so that you can tie it out to things like a Streamdeck and things like that.
When we talk about automation, especially when we talk about it on the Mac, what are your thoughts on a little bit side conversation, but what are your thoughts on app intents?
Oh my gosh, this is huge. So so we started this journey on the Zoom side last year with Zoom Cuts, and the idea was that, going back a couple of years, Siri has had the ability to take actions across different apps with Siri actions. Apple kind of overhauled that, and I want to say macOS Ventura, where they introduced this idea of an app intent. And an app intent is basically a developer having the ability to declare a unit of functionality from their application to the operating system. And originally that was just for shortcuts orchestration. So for Zoom Cuts, for example, we created a couple hundred app intents, spotlighting, pinning, getting the participant list, joining meetings, and we exposed those to Apple shortcuts. What Apple has just announced at WWDC is that now they're expanding the scope of what app intents can do beyond just shortcuts. And now it'll be able to actually be orchestrated by Apple Intelligence. That's really exciting, because it basically means that their enhanced version of Siri with Apple Intelligence will be able to take these actions across all of the different apps on the system. So Siri will essentially get up-leveled with all the skills of the shortcuts. That's one way of looking at it. But app intents, I think, are a great way of telling macOS basically what your apps can do, and letting those solutions, be it shortcuts or Apple Intelligence, kind of drive through the interface and get right to the functionality without having to simulate button presses or anything weird like that, like you'd have to do with other solutions like AutoHotkey and things like that. It lets you get right to the code where that unit of functionality is going to take place.
And so, theoretically, that means that you can have apps, they're exposing certain things. And this is almost like services that we had long ago with AppleScript and everything else. But these functionality, this app can do these things. And if it's opened and you ask for it, does it have to be opened, actually? Anyway, so
it can be backgrounded. It just has to be installed.
And so basically you can say, I want to send this over to this app to do this thing, and this app has delivered those things, and then send it over to another app and do something else, and then deliver it back. And you don't never have to open the apps themselves and do anything explicitly. It's just whatever they've exposed as these are things that we can do. And when you think about that as it relates to tiles, and then when you think about it as it relates to everything else, it's pretty powerful. And I think, as Andy said, I think that we've barely seen it work yet. I think this is brand new. Next question.
Paul Wallace in Austin, Texas, wonders, what is resaloom?
Oh, I didn't understand this question until Bill said it out loud, and now I know. Now I know.
I didn't either at first.
Resaloom is a media server. Yep.
Yeah, it's what we use a lot of times. I think it really came out of VJ work and so on and so forth. But it allows us to map lots of screens across one LED wall or one screen or whatever. So it lets you it's kind of a workplace. I mean, in the old days, we used to use things called spiders and lots of things like that. And resaloom is just one of the apps that would let you map all those things together and butt them up together and decide. You kind of have an arbitrary resolution space that you can work with, that you can throw different screens into. Next question.
Guy Cochran in Seattle, Washington. Max participants is currently 50. Could we do more in the future?
Go ahead, Andy.
Yeah, so max participants is actually not 50. It's 50 per gallery. So you can show 50, and just to be clear about what that actually looks like, in the editor tab here, I'm gonna show you what 50 tiles looks like so that's the maximum that you can do per display. You could have multiple displays, each of them with a maximum of 50, but that's the maximum number that we can do on one display.
And by the way, just change the corner radius.
Oh yeah, pull it in a little bit. Yeah.
Look at that. That's the thing. I know it seems like a little thing, but it's not. It's not chunky. It's not like it just smoothly changes. And being able to see how that whole look is going to look and feel is not trivial. Like I just want to, as someone who uses a lot of apps, it's not trivial. The first thing when I opened up tiles and I started moving the corner radius, and all the things just kind of did what they needed to do, and then I changed the thickness of the border, and it all just does it, and you get to see what that whole picture looks like. Oh, it's really good. Anyway, so so you could have 4, 5, 6 monitors, and it's not going to be duplicates. If you have all those monitors stacked down that side, it would if you had 200 people and across 4 monitors, it'd be all 200 of them would be seen. Is that right?
Yeah. So if you were going to do this, I would recommend set the resolution to like 9dp,
right.
The smallest possible. Because again, now we're talking about tiles that are tiny. And I would have a couple of these outputs, and I'd keep an eye on my CPU. I'd keep an eye on my bandwidth. But yeah, you could do quite a few because the software doesn't limit you beyond where the maximum state of the slider is on an individual display. And that's simply because there needs to be a limit somewhere. And this is extremely dense. And I don't know that you would get much more by having more tiles on a single display like this. You could stitch them together with the downstream media server by using multiple displays. But now you're starting to get into the realm of Unreal Engine and things like that, where you should be using high performance compute devices and more immersive, media server technologies than what tiles can do.
Next question.
Paul Wallace, back from Austin, Texas, wondering, what is a paper attendee?
Go ahead, Andy.
This would be pay per attendee.
Pay per. I love it.
Yeah, it's a type of license on the Zoom events platform that basically says you're going to be billed based on the number of people who attend your event.
See, I thought a paper attendee was someone who said they went, but they didn't. They signed up, they got the paper, but they didn't show up. Good for those extra credits that you have to get.
Spacing
for
matters.
work,
I have a friend who ordered a license plate, and it was supposed to be hi there, but they spaced it wrong, so it said hit here on the back of their car. Spacing matters.
Next question.
Let's go to Kyle Hammond in Chicago, Illinois. Can you assign positions that don't move even with automation? For instance, if I'm trying to maintain a center square for Tic-Tac-Toe.
Jonathan?
Yes, you can, with some limits. And Andy, it would be great if you could show this on your interface.
I'll work on that, yeah.
So it is possible to essentially freeze a participant that you like onto the gallery. And the way you do this is by starring, and we call it favoriting that participant. And that will keep them on the screen so that they won't be cycled out by the queue. They won't be removed by other methods. So you can see Andy there just favorited 2 participants. But I will note that favoriting keeps them on the gallery and keeps them in that rough order, but it does not necessarily ensure that they stay locked into that position in the screen. We do also support a fixed layout mode where instead of the tiles organically changing size as the number of participants grows and shrinks, the tiles are fixed and locked to an exact size that you specify. So through some combination of the fixed tile mode as well as these favoriting, you could get to keeping somebody in the center that you want. But I would also note as well that we don't currently have a method to say, I want this participant exactly in this location. So there is an element of, you can say, I like what I'm seeing and I want that to stay, but you can't say, I want this participant in that exact location if they're not there already.
And we have this concept of layout modes, right? Like Jonathan was alluding to before about like fixed tile size and scale to fit. I could see us expanding layout modes in the future to other types of options, but those are the two modes that we have today.
And one thing that I thought was, as I was playing with this, that I thought was really powerful, if we can try to just do a little interaction, we've got a little time left here. If we can go to 1920 by 1080, back to that kind of view. And one of the things that's cool is the padding doesn't have to be, obviously the same. So let's make it like, let's make the more tiles, make it, max. Yeah, that's great. Now, if we add padding, let's say to the right side or left side, if we add padding to the left side rather than, so we can control those all individually. And so add a lot of padding, like 400, over. So it really, I think if we,
so we've got, because we have scale to fit, it's going to try to make the tiles as large as possible while fitting your padding requirements. So that's 100. I can make 400.
Yeah, make it like 400.
Okay.
Yeah, but the idea here is maybe even like 600. So as you see it, so here's why I got so excited when I saw this. So it was like, at first I was like, I don't understand why I would need that. And then as soon as I started playing with it, I was like, okay, so like you can see it right now, the framing, Zoom Workplace on that one side. So imagine being able to flow everything to one side for your event, but you have other graphics that you want to put in down the side. And you might want to have the schedule for the day, your logos, your sponsors, all these other things that you want to display. And before this, it was really hard. Like, I just want to say, like, I know that seems like a little detail, but I was like, I started to move over. I moved it over by accident. I like typed the wrong number and it popped over and I was like, oh, I don't want that. And then I was like, oh, maybe I do want that. Like the idea that I could interactively play with this and have it just all flow. Like the problem you get into is this kind of the tar of grabbing onto something and going, I want to have something specific control, and then and that's why I think that it's important that you don't have things that just peg into one place and stick, because there's a value to it just responding to the general things that you need to manage, effectively. But that, like, you can see that framing right now with the Zoom Workplace there. You can see how many places that you might want to use that in the display of your event, because you could have, going across the bottom, you could have comments that are coming in as a ticker, and you could have all these things. So it's not just that this fills up screens with tiles, it's that you can, very, very fast and easily flow this into a look and feel that you wanted to have for, something completely different. So anyway, it's a really great, I was so excited to have you guys on. I know I'm gushing a little bit. But it's just such a fantastic app. So I'm just really excited to see.
I really appreciate that. I'd never even considered a look like this before, and I think it looks great. So that's what we love about this app, is that it gives us the ability to let you iterate on ideas, and you're not confined to what we had thought of. You have the ability to create quickly something that, like you said, it minimizes the time between I have an idea to I have something that I can test. Yeah. And the ability to shorten that cycle creates innovation.
And just that what I just talked about, that was an accident. Like, it was a mistype. Like, I just typed the wrong number in, and the pad flew over, and I was like, oh. Like, it wasn't something I thought of. It's just something I saw. And I think that's one of the things that's so important about the interactive nature of it being able to be able to respond, because I would have never designed it that way. I would have never gone into something and laid it all out. I think that it was just it's really fascinating. Jonathan and Andy, thank you so much for your time. I just really appreciate having you here.
Yeah, really great to visit.
When you have a new update, we want to see it. Every big update that you have here with tiles, please come back and show us what you're doing, because we're really excited about this application.
Yeah, happy to do so.
Great. And thanks to the panelists who made this possible. So great answers in the front hour. And if you're interested in being a panelist, of course, you can go to officehours.global/panelist. We'd love to have you. It's just, you're bringing all of this knowledge to everyone. And we want to thank all the panelists for the contribution they make every single day. We were talking about it last night. We had our evening show last night, and our first evening show in a long time. and which I think went great. I would definitely check it out. But we realized that, for 1,500 times, over 1,500 times, we've gotten up every morning not knowing who's going to be here. And panelists just show up, and it's just such a generous offering to everyone else to make your knowledge available. So thank you so much to the panelists who are here today. Thanks to the producers asking all these questions. We also don't know what questions we're going to have. That's the producers file this in, and make it possible. We do know who's going to be doing the show, because we have this great volunteer team in the back end that's developing the products, that's organizing the teams, that is producing the actual show, that is figuring out what the content's going to be. And we thank everybody for their contribution as well. It is really a giant team effort. Every single day that you see this show, there's a huge team that's putting this together and making it possible. And everybody's donating their time to do this. We traveled today. If we had gone around, the Tlaloc Traversal is, if we had gone person to person and asked these questions, we would have traveled 89,000 miles. It's 143,000 kilometers, and that is 703 million bananas for scale. All right, let's go ahead and jump into After Hours. That was great. Good. It's fun just to open and play with.
Yeah, that's the danger. I'll spend so much time just being like, ooh, I like this look.
I like joining meetings with it. I just, I don't join random meetings with it because you have to ask for a record. But I join some of our meetings with it, and I start to play with just like what would this look like, and how would I do it, and the fact that it's just kind of like and it gives you something to do when people are talking. So anyway, it's good. Thanks again, guys.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, see
Take
you later.
care.
All right, see you.